Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Zoom in deference to the growing numbers of COVID-19 positive cases and other considerations. But this evening, to talk about something that apparently the whole country is more or less talking about, are fearful about, and so on. And that is, of course, the power crisis. We're not talking political power or anything of the sort. We're talking about electricity, our energy. And who better than that than an energy specialist? Newsline has a habit of bringing in the relevant people. And certainly my guest this evening is very relevant indeed, with years and years of experience in the area. He is, of course, none other than Dr. Tilak Siyambalapitiya. Very good evening to you, Dr. Tilak.
Good evening to you.
Thank you. So let me start by asking you, Dr. Siyambalapitiya, why on earth are we 74 years nearly later in charge of our own destiny, and we can't get one of the most fundamental things needed for any country these days, the power? Why have we got these power cuts again? What's going on? Is it really the lack of dollars, or is there some other explanation?
For us, I'm going to tell you that even if we have loads of dollars, there would be power cuts this year.
Oh, really? Why?
Yes, let me explain. In fact, the power cuts were forecast for year 2018. Now I will tell you the reason.
Mm-hmm.
Sri Lanka built and commissioned the last major power plant in 2014, and that was Norachole number 3. And thereafter, the power plants that should have been built or should have commenced construction have not even been started by now. So therefore, our forecast was that there will be power cuts in 2018, but because the demand did not grow as expected, and come 2019, there were some power cuts just before Sinhala New Year, if you remember.
Mm.
And come April 2019, we all know what happened, and the demand slumped after the bomb. So therefore, we escaped 2019 blackouts as well, to a large extent. Come 2020, we have COVID. So therefore, the demand slumped again. 2021, the same issue. And we are on the path for normalization of the customer demand, our manufacturing, household demand, and our commercial activities. And now we have to face this situation. So I emphasize that even if we had loads of dollars to buy all the fuel we need, we would have had power cuts this year. Let me explain it with a simple table. Let me share my screen. You see some numbers on the screen.
Right.
First of all, let us understand that electricity has 2 indicators about its capacity, that is ability to provide electricity, and the other indicator is energy, that is the kilowatt hours, the units that your meter measures and on which your bill is prepared. So here, what we have is a shortage of capacity. And as you all know, capacity is measured in megawatt.
Mm-hmm.
What I put on this table is the capacities of different power plants we have and their capabilities to the closest 100 megawatt of electricity. So don't blame me if I have missed the last digit in these numbers. Let me keep it very simple with this rounded off numbers. So now what do we have? We have oil burning thermal power plants, 1,200 megawatt. We have coal burning thermal power plants, 900 megawatt. Then we have large hydropower. You will see that I've shaded it yellow, 1,400 megawatt. These are Victoria, Kotmale, Randenigala, Rantambe, Lakshapana, Mausakale, all these reservoirs and power plants that work together to produce electricity from hydropower. Then, of course, we have wind, small hydropower, biomass, solar parks, which are all run by the private sector, 800 megawatt.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have on our rooftops a total of 400 megawatt. So these numbers are rounded off. So we have a capacity to produce electricity amounting to 4,700 megawatt. This means if the customers jointly ask for a 1 kilowatt of electrical capacity by switching on your electric iron, I want 500 watt of electrical capacity by switching off a television and 20 lights, whatever it is, customers jointly cause a demand on the system, and that to meet the demand, we have 4,700 megawatt. But under one condition, there should be water in the reservoirs to run the large hydropower. There should be wind flowing at its full capacity. There should be water flowing in the streams of the upcountry to produce electricity from small hydropower, enough biomass to produce electricity from firewood power plants. Sun should be shining to produce electricity from solar parks and from your rooftop. And as you know very well, I look at the last column. Let's look at the last column to cut it short. If we have loads of money to buy the fuel, we have 1,000 megawatt, 1,200 megawatt of oil burning thermal power plants. We have the money and we can run 900 megawatt of coal power plants. Of course, provided all these power plants are also in a good running condition. In the height of the drought, our experience is that our bundle of large hydropower plants, which are capable of 1,400 megawatt, actually can produce only 500 megawatt, January to April at night time. And we know very well that solar is not available in the night. Wind flow is very low between January and April. Anybody who has gone through school will know the southwest monsoon is over. It's a northeast monsoon, which is a weak monsoon, which does not bring in enough wind. So my estimate is that this group of 800 megawatt of power plants and 400 megawatt on the rooftop will produce at most 100 megawatt in the night. So you add up these numbers, assuming that all these power plants are in good working condition, I get only 2,700 megawatt. Sri Lanka's forecast peak demand this year is 2,900 megawatt, expected to occur in the month of March or early part of April at 7 p.m. in the night. So we are on the path to achieve that customer demand target. And in 2020, Sri Lanka reported 2,717. Just 2 days ago, CB reported 2,720. So we are getting there. Now, I don't have to tell you, if we have only 2,700, your demand is 2,900. Even if we have loads of money and all power plants in perfect working conditions, we have to cut off 200 megawatt in the night. So how do we avoid it now? We overdraw the reservoirs. Yesterday, CB has been compelled to draw almost 1,100 megawatt of electricity from large hydropower plants. Which
1,100 megawatts.
1,100 instead of my estimate of 500. So reservoirs are being overdrawn, which will be detrimental to the weeks and months ahead until we get the southwest monsoon. So what I'm saying is the fact that there is no wind, there is no rain, and that there is no sunshine in the night is not news to me and not news to you as well, particularly in the month of January to April, because that's the time we do harvesting. That's the time for sports meets and big patches. It does not rain. It's not news that it doesn't rain. It's not news that it doesn't, the sun doesn't shine at 9 p.m. to produce electricity from solar. So all these are known and included in the plans, but these plans do not materialize. There are some people who will not allow projects to be built. So we get into this situation once in several years, but even if you do not have load shedding in a particular year, that does not mean that we are not in crisis. The crisis has been camouflaged using money. So what we see here is the combined effect of non-implementation of power generation projects.
Can I ask you, Dr. Tilak, in comparison to other countries and so on, which source of power is the most clean and affordable? The combination of that, but the cheapest in terms of money. Which one would it be?
Well, first of all, let me say that electricity production in any country is never from a single source. Just like in the transport sector, there is a role for trains and buses and cars and vans and three-wheelers and bicycles. Similarly, each source of energy to produce electricity has a role in combination with each other to meet the customer demand. So that's a fundamental philosophy. Now, your question is, what is the cheapest clean source?
Yeah.
Now, the cleanest source to produce electricity at this moment, in my view, is solar. But it's not available in the night. So what do? It has to be backed up with an equal and more capacity. Why do I say equal? Because even during daytime, if a cloud movement comes in, you need a power plant to start off and bridge the gap. Secondly, solar, electricity produced from solar power all over the world is going down in price, but not in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, rooftop solar is offered 22 rupees and ground-mounted solar is now on competitive bidding. It started off at 23 rupees. Now the bids apparently that have been published are going in the range of about 17 rupees. We hear that there have been more recent bids which are even cheaper. But then Sri Lanka's investors are now lobbying the government, we know, to go back to fixed price mechanism, which will be 23 rupees or 22 rupees. So therefore, the answer to a question is the clean is not cheap. And some of the cleaner sources are cheaper in other countries, but not in Sri Lanka because of the manipulated procurement mechanism. I don't have to explain it a lot to you.
So, Dr. Tilak, in short, it's corruption. Departures from due process.
You may say so. Let me explain it as follows. Now, Sri Lanka had a virtually conventional power generating system. We started off with hydropower, Vimala Surendra's work and subsequent work under Mahaveli. And through various governments, the policy was clean energy. So when the rest of the world was using coal and nuclear to produce electricity and uplift their economies, we were lagging behind, but continuing to focus on renewable energy. So as recently as year 1995, we had a 100% renewable electricity generating system. Can you believe? When US was 80%, India was 90% coal, we had a 100% renewable energy system, just like Bhutan, Laos, and Nepal, 100%. But then when our large hydro resources were developed and completed, and then there was a requirement to go in for thermal power generation. We started off with it, but then it's nothing but a story of hiccups one after the other, in which the cheaper thermal power plants were never allowed to be built and finally bridged by very expensive oil-burning power plants. So this is the sad part of the story of Sri Lanka's power sector development. So the answer to your question is that it will be a mix to the extent that we can afford. And it will be a mix on which the capacity, the capability, the price, and the limitations will be understood by the governments, the politicians, as well as the general public as well. I'm sure for us, you are also hearing stories such as there's sea around the country and electricity can be produced from seawater. Now, the number of times I hear this, causes me to suspect that there may be some student textbook that actually says so. Or there may be some teacher's handbook in Sri Lanka that says that electricity can be produced from seawater. In fact, there is no country producing electricity from seawater. On a commercial scale, there are some pilot projects going on wave energy, etc., etc. So like that, we should dispel the myths. We should also understand the capabilities and limitations of all the sources. Coal, nuclear, oil, gas, solar, wind, biomass, the full spectrum. So it's a combination of these properly mixed up through a proper procurement process, not a roundabout procurement process that can bring us the combination of energy that we need to meet the customer demand at an affordable price, because affordability is also a very difficult question to answer. You may afford something, India may be affording something, but in Sri Lanka, affordability in the eyes of most customers is zero. Everybody wants electricity, if possible, free of charge.
That seems to be a recipe for disaster. On that note, let's take a quick break and a peek at this evening's primetime news, obviously produced by that wonderful young team at Newsfirst. We'll see you on the other side of the break, shall we?
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. My guest this evening is Dr. Tilak Siyambalapitiya, who is, of course, an energy specialist. Now then, Dr. Siyambalapitiya, in your considered opinion, how do we bring the Ceylon Electricity Board to the same par as other international similar institutions?
All right. Let me say it is not the considered opinion, it is the calculated opinion. I do a lot of calculations. How much it costs to produce electricity, how much is it being sold at, what is the loss expected of CEB, and what portion of that is actually related to political decisions, and what portion of that possibly is related to inefficiency. We should be able to separate out the responsibility of CEB, things that they can control and things that they cannot control. Coming back to your question, internationally, load shedding, or as we generally call it, power cuts, are things of the past. Tamil Nadu, that had power cuts ever since I started visiting there in the 1970s, announced in 2017 that they are now surplus in terms of electricity generating capacity. Same with Bangladesh. So Sri Lanka has been boasting a few years ago that we are the only country providing 24-hour electricity. Surely you have heard this slogan, but we know very well that it is a short-lived situation, and the crisis was brewing underneath. So to bring CEB to world class, first of all, the political hierarchy should ensure that power generation projects to meet the customer demand are implemented on time without delays. So the causes of delays we can discuss if you want later. The second thing is the price and the cost of electricity. So our Electricity Act specifies that CEB and LECO both separate jointly and sometimes individually have to submit their costs for approval to the Public Utilities Commission. So the approved cost is approximately 23 rupees last year. So what Public Utilities Commission says is that I have evaluated your costs, I've done the calculations myself, and I approve charging 23 rupees per kilowatt hour. And the same Public Utilities Commission has approved the price, which amounts to only 17 rupees.
17
against 23. So the Electricity Act says the price should be equal to cost unless the government has pledged subsidies. Who should facilitate it? The Public Utilities Commission. So we have the Public Utilities Commission, which appears to be having a lot of power and the sole authority to determine and approve the costs and the plans and everything about the electricity sector, but being unable to adjust the electricity prices to be equal to cost. Now, I know advocating price increase is very unpopular. Sri Lankans want everything free. But then if you ask for everything free or significantly below cost, that means that institution, whether it is government or private, is going down the drain. And this is very visible when we look at CEB's performance and even LECO's performance in terms of reliability of electricity supply. Now, reliability means unannounced outages. I'm not referring to power cuts we have. Suddenly power goes off and comes off. So those indices that measure reliability are worsening for both CEB and LECO. My assessment for that is that these two agencies are not investing enough to upgrade the power system, generation, transmission, distribution. So that is the third qualifier for a world-class electricity supply. So if I summarize, the first one is production should be adequate to meet the demand. And number two, the cost and the price should be equal. And number three, the customer service and the reliability should be on an increasing trend. And in our electricity board, and to a lesser extent of LECO, all these indices are on a downward trend, and only disaster awaits us and the institution in the future.
It sounds very frustrating, if that's the right word, that the Republic has got to suffer because of various presidents, prime ministers, ministers, and the other sort of state-owned enterprise personnel. So who is at the bottom of this? Is it because the CB didn't plan, the engineers didn't plan it? Or is it that although they planned it, politicians of the day were more interested in perhaps some other collateral purpose other than serving the genuine needs of the electricity in this country?
Planning, who should do the plan and how it should be reviewed and approved is actually written in the Electricity Act itself. So the Electricity Act says the power generating system should be planned by CEB. The transmission should be planned by CEB, and the distribution network should be planned by the relevant distribution entities, which include LECO as well. To my knowledge, these planning activities are happening as expected and updated every year. In the case of generation, it's a 20-year plan updated every year. So it's a rolling plan. In case of transmission, the big lines that go from one city to another, it's a 10-year rolling plan. For distribution, the lines you see on the roadside and the transformer, etc., it's a 5-year rolling plan. Now, why is one for 20 years, the other one for 10, and the other one for 5? Is because it takes such a long time to build a large power generating facility. Whereas at the other end of the network, to build a distribution network, to finance it and get it built, you don't need 5 years. You can do it faster. So the problem for us is that plans are being made according to the law. The Public Utilities Commission is also approving it, and there are some problems there as well. But the fundamental problem is that the approved plans are not allowed to be implemented. So there's nothing better than considering an example. So what is the crisis today? Because early in the program, I told you, in the month of April at 7 p.m. on a weekday, Sri Lanka has only 2,700 megawatt under perfect conditions, and the demand is 2,900. Power has to be cut. So I just told you the plans are prepared. So the plan of if you look at the plan of 2015, what does it say about today? It says that Sri Lanka should have had the Sampur power plant running. Sri Lanka should have the 500 megawatt Sampur power plant running. Sri Lanka should have Keralapitiya number 2 power plant running. Sri Lanka should have a LNG import terminal operation. So you should be asking me what happened to this. And everybody knows that the Sampur power plant was cancelled by the president in 2016. You know who the president was? Just overnight. There was a court case against the power plant, but what we see in other countries is that a court case arises because there is a public grievance. So governments have to face that and address that issue. It could be an environment-related grievance or relocation-related grievance or even a policy-related grievance. But the governments have to meet that challenge and resolve that issue rather than telling the court, we are not building the power plant. So we are running with a 500 megawatt shortage. So what happened to the LNG terminal? What happened to Keralapitiya number 2 power plant? It's common knowledge. Keralapitiya terminal went haywire, different bidders bringing in different offers. I'm talking about 2016, 17, 18, 19. Finally, the two politicians were struggling with each other, and finally nothing was done. So now we have a new government, and with the blessings of the government, CB called for competitive bids for the gas terminal. What happened to that is history. It's in the courts, isn't it? The gas terminal issue. So my assessment is that at the end of the day, we will have a lot of court cases and no power plants. So therefore, the difficulties that are with us today with new projects will have an impact in 2026 onward. Why is that? It takes 4 years to build a gas terminal or a big power plant, minimum. So when we have the power cuts in 2026 for us, remind you of this discussion we had today, and you can be confirmed, and I can say almost for sure that there will be power cuts in 2026 as well. And the reason is Keralapitiya gas terminal and the power plants. And the Norachole number 4 power plant that was cancelled by the president just 6 months ago. So it's very easy to cancel projects owing to policy matters or commercial pressure, NGO pressure. You can have any excuse, but you're cancelling a project that has 5 years of work already done on the project. That takes another 5 years to build, and you cancel the project. You cannot revive it for a total of 10 years from now, and it will be too late. And Sri Lanka is simply going through these cycles one after the other. It's very sad. As I indicated in a recent newspaper article, in my assessment, Sri Lanka has lost at least $16 billion owing to manipulation of generation projects in the power sector alone. I'm not talking about any other sectors. In the power sector and in the petroleum sector, the major projects that have been manipulated and therefore delayed and replaced by oil-fired generation at enormous cost. If we had that $16 billion for us, we would not be talking about foreign currency crisis, isn't it?
Very well said indeed, Dr. Tilak Siyambalapitiya. And with that, I'm afraid we've run out of time. Such an interesting conversation. And like always, when you're having a good time in terms of this conversation, it comes to an end all too soon. But Dr. Tilak Siyambalapitiya, thank you very much for putting us in the picture. And we hope that people with your expertise will all have the urge to merge and bring Sri Lanka to a spot where we deserve to be. On that note, thank you very much. And that's the way it was on Newsline Zoom. Take care. And as always, God bless you.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.